You have freedoms, but there are limits to those freedoms. Your freedoms are not unlimited. Similarly, speech, you have freedom to speak, but there are limits to how far you can go with your speech. Such language such as speech that is hate speech, though not in the law or the judiciary, um, hate speech is not seen as a crime. It is a very dangerous direction to head down. And there are limitations to hate speech, which are controlled by different bodies. Now, hate speech is a warning or a shot across the bow of intent. Let's continue onwards. Freedom within limits. What is freedom within limits? I am free to do whatever I want to do once it is not hurting or injuring anyone, including myself. Freedom within limits. So if there's an intent to do bodily harm, that is dangerous. Unless you're in an atmosphere where that is allowed, and there's a disclaimer, such as combat sports. Let me go into a little bit more about freedom within limits, because a lot of people do not realize democracy is that. There is no such thing as an unlimited freedom. If everybody was free to do whatever they wanted, all kinds of crazy things would happen. Take, for example, on the roads. If everyone was free to just drive where they wanted to, do whatever they wanted to, there'd be a lot of accidents and a lot of people would die. Though unintentionally, that's what happens. Hence, we have laws about driving on certain sides of the road, obeying traffic lights, following signs, laws for pedestrians, laws for drivers, laws for people who may be pushing baby carriages or cyclists, etc. There are different laws for different people, and you get different license to use the vehicle once you have passed the understanding of these laws and shown a certain ability to use your freedoms within those laws. So we have what are called driving exams and driving tests. Freedom within limits. Once a society agrees on what the limits are, they are formed into laws. Excuse me. As Republicans would say, United States of America is a nation of laws. Now, having said that, certain people want to challenge the freedoms and the limits of the freedoms. Let me say, the one freedom you do not have in a democracy is to overturn the democracy. That is a no, 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 no. You don't have that freedom. And that is the line that Donald Trump, members of Congress, and certain members of the Senate, as well as certain groups that followed Donald Trump. Now, note, I didn't say everyone in that rally violated those terms. Let me make it abundantly clear. There were members and Trump supporters that attended that rally who did not participate in the insurrection. Those people have violated no laws. Those people have not gone with that intent. And those people were not involved in that planning of the event. And when they saw what was happening, they went their way. Let me make it abundantly clear. Those people, while Donald Trump was speaking words that riled up the crowd to do what it was going to do, which was already proposed and knew what it was going to do, a lot of members in that crowd, there were members who took it as political rhetoric. And even if it was an incitement to violence, they did not follow through with that. All right? So let's just make that abundantly clear. That was a line they were not willing to cross. However, a lot of members crossed that line. And that is a line of no return. That is a line against democracy. For the senators and the congressmen who defiled their oath to the United States Constitution by lying to the American public and persisting in disseminating fraudulent information in the face of having been rebuffed and debunked by actual members of the state, senators and congressmen like them, persisting along the line after being corrected, these people must be held accountable for their lies. Because that is also a facilitation and an incitement of a coup. By giving erroneous information and also agitating the base, not only through the words that are used, but also in terms of the delivery of those words, which we must pay attention to. Inciting violence is not just in the verbose, it is in the delivery of the verbose, for which a Supreme Court does not take into account. They simply look at the printed word, but you must also look at the delivery of the printed word. And while rhetoric in politics can be used to stir up the base and motivate them, it is a different thing when it is used to incite people to do acts of violence, which they plan on doing anyway, and was pre-planned. And we know now that this event, through a lot of information now, we know that this event was not only sponsored, was not only facilitated by certain members of Congress and the Senate and the president, but it was a coordinated event. That is to say, the crowd knew what Donald Trump was saying to them. And Donald Trump knew what he was saying to them. He chose certain words, but the context and understanding was very clear. And the easy way to know this, and we're already learning, is through the very protesters themselves, the so-called protesters, the domestic terrorists. First of all, we need to know their understanding of what Donald Trump was saying, which I'm sure we'll get in numerous confessions before the FBI and before the Department of Justice. But further, I would not be surprised, because obviously this is several different reasons. One, they're using Trump flags. Two, they got the MAGA hats on. Three, they have their symbols on. The people who will be excused from this situation will be the people who did not conduct themselves in the acts of violence. And not only that, but did not trespass across the grounds. These are the people who were smart enough to understand that that's not for me. I will march to the Capitol. I'll protest. I'll even have my little pitchfork. I saw a guy with a little pitchfork and a flag and shit. But he stayed outside the Capitol. You know what I'm saying? He ain't going in the Capitol building. He does his protest on the road. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Put the pressure on them. It's okay. That's freedom of speech. That's freedom of expression. And he did his little artsy thing with the pitchfork and what it symbolized and blah, 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 blah. I was like, yes, sir. I can respect you. Because, to be honest with you, symbolism and imagery is powerful. I'll give you a perfect example. I'll give you a bad one, and I'll give you a good one. Bad one. Confederate flag moving across the halls of the Capitol building. Mockery of leadership by the gentleman who picked up the podium and walked across. Powerful images. Powerful images. Let me tell you what it means. Confederate flag. The symbol of the Confederacy, which was dismantled and overthrown through the Civil War by the Republic. America's a republic. What is the Confederacy flag doing? Why are they pushing for these values? What was the Civil War about? Slavery. What was the Civil War about? Suffrage. suffrage. This man is saying we shall suppress suffrage. Of who? Of the coloreds, the black people, the minorities. And that is what is being contested. The podium of the Speaker of the House was taken up and paraded around in mockery. What is that about? You heard them chanting, "This is our house, this is our place." But who is our? Who is we? Our is not the voice of the people. The voice of the people would never have done that. Our is the groups that claim that their rights and privileges are being taken away from them. Our is specific to a particular group of people that these particular people who support Donald Trump represent. And their way of seizing back that power is not through process, is not through activism, because that is failing them. It is through suppression and through might, physical might and power. They will seize back that power and do with it whatsoever they want and wreak mockery on it. That is the powerful symbolism of the guy taking up the podium, laughing and clowning and carrying it away. In other words, I seize back the power. It's mine. Let me give you a positive symbolism. And they paraded these things for the public, to terrorize the public, to say, you, America, was founded by us, and we are powerful, but they don't feel powerful. It's a compensation. And they use terror and fear to beat down the American public into fearing them, into hating them, but to fear them, saying we are capable of doing this anytime we feel like it. That's how they were able to control the slaves and the people who got franchised. How? Lynching. Make an example, a public example. And so that symbol was a powerful, potent symbol. And that is why the American people are angry. Because you're trying to terrorize them. You're trying to terrorize them and say, get out of line, boy, and I'll lynch you. And they're trying to lynch the American people. You saw the gallows outside. Horrific. Symbolism is more potent than actual literalism. And that's why certain congressmen in the vote today, about 10 or 11 of them, Republicans, voted for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Because they understood the potency of that symbolism. A spit in the face of America. And these people, and Trump saying, you are nobody. You are nobody. You are subservient to us. You will fear us, and you will fear Donald Trump. And Donald Trump will be president. And we will rule over you. Get in line, boy. But now, boy, is for all those colored-loving Americans and all those dilly-dallying politicians that a nickel and a buck and a dime and a bribe and an intimidation can turn them one way or the other, boy. I want you to feel the visceralism. And this is the seating anger underneath America. This is why they're so mad. This is why the military, on seeing this, was fuming because it's a different type of terrorism. It's a terrorism that goes beyond. So when I heard this gentleman was on bail and he was getting death threats, it wasn't surprising to me because the symbolism, he took the podium and he laughed and he jeered and he made mockery of the leadership of the country, the speaker, the office of the Speaker of the House. I don't care if the name is Nancy Pelosi. You got to honor the office. He made fun of it. So you got to understand, some of those boys up in the South been serving in the military. When they saw that, they turned around and spat on the ground in disgust. Even if you're from the deep South, you look at that and you be all mad because you know what that means. It'd be like that little boy the little boy went up in the Capitol and that little boy spat in our face. He make us look like we niggas. He gonna spat up in our face. You know how country folk are. They straight up. All them old war veterans, you know how they be. You know how they look. That boy, he need a good hiding. Beat that boy. You know what I'm saying? You have no idea how revolting that was for a lot of Americans. It's a spit in the face of what America is. Trying to replace it with a past that has long since been defeated. Visceral. So if there's rage and anger right at this point in time that the man should be impeached, it's understandable. For those who dedicated to Donald Trump and they're still living in the Kool-Aid, that doesn't excuse it. I'm sorry. The rage will continue and the anger. That's why I said, if they in some way, shape, or form don't do something soon, that's World War III. World War III. Symbolism. Let me show you the other approach. The same guy I talked about with the pitchfork and the symbolism on his shirt. While he was 100% wrong on his premise, I loved what he did. He took the arts, which is always potent. He took his pitchfork and he said, the liberties that we have, the foundation of America, this is not what it stands for. He almost 100% correct, except for one thing. His premise is faulty. He had been deceived. He had been tricked into believing the elections were robbed. But the way how he moved was saying, I am a part of America. There's a difference between thinking you are the center of America and America owes you something, and the difference between saying I'm a part of America. Where is my respect and place? And I will follow the laws, but I will speak my mind and let you know what it is. That's a different thing. Be outspoken. That's how the conversations happen. Be persistent. No one's telling you if you're wrong, you're wrong. But let's get to it. I can respect people like that. But you cross a damn line. You cross a line. You cross the line. Freedom of speech is a beautiful thing, and people get away with all kinds of shit. But then when you take action behind that and cross a damn line, don't expect me to be with you. You're on your own. Freedom within limits. If somebody go and chain you up and you end up killing somebody, I'm not there with you, buddy. I'm not. That's on you. Donald Trump is throwing these people under the bus. He don't want to acknowledge nothing. Oh, what they did was deplorable. Throwing them under the bus. Okay. So like I said, in the political arena, impeachment is absolutely appropriate for this situation. And speedy impeachment. I'll tell you why. The sooner Donald Trump is impeached for the blatant insurrection that he brought forth and is responsible for, which he has not accepted any responsibility for. And some of his people and Fox News have all been trying to deflect it. Dishonesty. But we'll talk about that a little later. Here's what's the problem. He still has the powers of the president. That's the problem. And he can use those powers any way he so choose as president, particularly in this sensitive matter where finally we're going to get the inauguration of the president of the United States, Joe Biden. Let me explain to you why this is dangerous and why he needs to be removed from office before that happens. I'm going to let my thoughts and feelings out there in the open so people will duly take knowledge and note it. If there is a clash between the police and the military and rioters or insurrectionists in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, 17th to the 20th, Donald Trump still has the power in that melee and confusion to call and he has the people around him to do this. A Wild Wild West scenario where the military or the army takes over. I'm trying to remember what the word is. I'm trying to remember what the word is. It's good. It's going to come to me. For some reason, I just can't remember that word right now. It's going to come to me. It's going to come to me. It slipped my mind. My mind's slow. They actually were attempting to do that, and actually one of the people who was pardoned by him, a criminal, was suggesting that for the state of Philadelphia. Hold on a second. It's going to come to me. Anyway, it'll come when it wants to come. It's on the verge. It's strange. You feel the chemical reaction when it's coming, and then it just disappears. But nonetheless, we'll get it. We'll get it. It'll come to me. Martial law. That's the word. He could declare martial law on the inauguration day or before. That is why he needs to be removed from office. And that is why Mitch McConnell is wise enough to understand that they need to call the Senate and get this guy out of there as soon as possible. Wednesday is the inauguration day, but we have this whole weekend, this whole entire weekend we got to deal with. And then on top of that, we still got a couple more days before Wednesday. Two, Donald Trump can cause an international incident strategically involved to allow, for example, Russia's involvement in American affairs by doing a preemptive strike on Russia through Alaska. He could create an international incident. He does have the nuclear codes. He's very capable of doing something like this if he cannot maintain power. This is why Nancy Pelosi is so nervous. He is the president of the United States. And the only way that will not happen is if the military is instructed to civilly to disobey any instruction or command from him. That he's the president in power, but they literally stop him from implementing anything that he so chooses to do in the White House. He's effectively nullified in the White House. They'll just have to disobey anything that he says, or aides will have to stall him, or they'll take their time and just do the procedural stuff. He has the capability of going ballistic. I mean, seriously ballistic. He is a threat to national security. I'll give you one more case. He's very determined to still be president of the United States. And he's willing to have an insurrection to get him in power. He can have on the inauguration day a terrorization of the different states and the different areas in the United States of America as they organize and plan. And he can, through executive orders, enable these groups, if they are able to overthrow one state or governance of one state, or at least hold ransom a member of state. And so he can execute executive orders to enable protection or pardoning of these individuals in given states. So you have to understand, he has the power to pardon people from federal laws. He has incredible powers, man, at his disposal. And he can use every single last one he has. That is why I cannot understand why Mike Pence does not realize how direly important it was for him using the 25th Amendment, which they say is inappropriately used, but there's a Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, which is specifically for this purpose. And Vice President Mike Pence should have harnessed and used the 25th Amendment to get him out of office. Because now the clear and present danger, which is before us, we wouldn't have to worry about Donald Trump being a contributor to that. You take one dangerous, very powerful piece off the chessboard. This impeachment hearing, depending on how Mitch McConnell pulls this off, how he moves, will determine if we remove that piece off the chessboard, at least, hopefully, before the 20th. Once he's convicted and stripped of his powers and stripped of also his election powers, once he's impeached, he's immediately removed from office. And on top of that is his powers that when he's in office, he can't exercise those powers. This is the most important thing. Now, whether the military or aides or the FBI or the CIA or the Department of Justice will obey those orders, and that could set a precedent again. But it would depend on the moral, ethical lines that people are willing to cross. But it's a very dicey situation. But the first step in the right direction was impeaching him. This is correct. This is the correct procedure, the correct way to go about it. How you interpret the actual language that is used to impeach him is dependent on how Congress and also how the Senate determines how they will interpret the language going forward. We'll set a precedent. There's a lot of unprecedented things happening here. But again, the action of this president was unprecedented. All right, so let's continue onwards. So there are limits to things. Free speech has limits. And anyone telling you that free speech is unlimited are talking a load of baloney. While you are free to say all kinds of things in the world, you are not free to incite violence with your speech. All right? And even though there's a lot of leeway with politicians, you need to always pay attention to the environments in which they are in, the context in which they speak, and what happens after. And if it cannot be coincidental that people were prepared to overthrow a government after a rally. That's not a spontaneous thing. That doesn't happen. The optics might have looked so in the beginning, but obviously was well organized. So that speech was also a well-prepared speech. You heard what Donald Trump said. He gave away the game plan by saying it was appropriate. He said, and that's the right word. It was an appropriate speech for riling up the crowd, and the language that he particularly used, not so much the other lawyer and the other guy and the legislator, but the language that he used was proofread. But you can't just go off the language he uses. You have to look at the delivery of the language. You have to look at the context of the environment he's in. And not only that speech in isolation, you must look at several speeches in one after the other, and the premise under which the whole rally was happening, to find context. It's very important people are accountable for their actions, and you cannot go through just technicalities and isolated incidents. So that at least people who represent us, whether they're politicians or whether they are they're politicians or whether they are elected officials in governance, know that there are boundaries to things, like attacking democracy and attacking the institutions. There are boundaries to those things. And even in countries, okay, let's take up, for instance, the impeachment of Bill Clinton. There was no law. He didn't do anything illegal. It was the optics of it that caused him to be impeached. And then he lied on the stand. This is why he was impeached. Okay? He didn't do anything illegal. All right? He did something immoral. This is very important. And that's why he was impeached. So, impeachment can go along the grounds of these things. Now, with respect to criminality, again, in the political court of opinion, if the sentiment of the public is that certain acts are criminal, like not necessarily in the absolute legal language, but inciting an insurrection, not using inciting speech to cause an insurrection, which is the legal terms, but inciting an insurrection, and that is frowned upon by the society, then similarly, the Senate can impeach him on those grounds. I'm sorry, they can convict him on the impeachment on those grounds. Because you don't have to go down necessarily the legal route. because it's not a court of law they're in, it's the legislator. And even though they're having a court, the court is not held like the courts of the land. This is impeachment and conviction of impeachment with the political consequence of a person being removed from their office, not being able to run. It's a political thing. It is not necessarily a legal thing where the person is put in jail or prison. That's for the courts. So let's talk about symbolism. So I told you about the guy who he did symbolism. That is not harmless. It's actually powerful. It's actually potent. When people use the arts and symbols, they're not breaking any laws, but they're expressing themselves and that is what other ethnic groups have had to do because they couldn't break the law. But when with impunity, people decide we are disenfranchised for the first time in our lives or whatever, or we haven't gotten attention, and they decide to break laws. I heard in Congress some false equivalencies. They were speaking about something about somebody getting held hostage or some police place where people attacked it. I think, yes, I remember that. In certain places there was outrage and the people attacked the police. I think it was police departments. I remember that. That wasn't this year. I think that was either 2019 or 2018. This was after an individual was shot dead by the police, which is outrageous. And there's no consequence for it. It ended up in violence. Now, let me just say, I don't justify that either. While I can understand it because there's literally a grounds for it, I don't justify it. So, violence and destruction and destroying your city and destroying your town and torching it and lighting it on fire. And I don't think Black Lives Matter, the actual Black Lives Matter was involved in that. That was, again, the same kind of terrorist-minded people. And who knows if it was infiltrated or not. But I'm going to go with, okay, that's on Black Lives Matter. They decided a peaceful protest and it ends up being on them. It's labeled on them. That's consistent with Donald Trump being labeled with those insurrectionists. It's consistent. Excuse me. But at the end of the day, that is not overthrowing a democracy or overthrowing a country. Let's make that abundantly clear. But it is extremely, yes, damaging. There's a lot of property and and some of the people who actually would support you, you're destroying their businesses. That is hooliganism. That is hooliganism and thuggery. And those hooligans and thugs that do that, I don't ever rationalize it. Destroying of property and places that have nothing to do with your protest, not directing your attention to the actual source, is not is nothing to be defended. It's illegal, and the people should also be prosecuted. But do understand that what happened here was much, much worse than that, because it's the seat of power that was targeted. There's freedom within limits. A lot more freedom than any other system in the world. You're free to do all kinds of things, including be involved in politics if you so wish. You're free to be whatever you want to be. You're free to more or less go wherever you want to go. You got to follow the rules of different properties and places. So the point behind it is, if you want to plan a trip to go from Michigan all the way down to New Mexico, you can do it. Nobody's going to stop you. You got the resources, you got the money, you got the means to do it, you can do it. That's the beauty of democracy. So it's freedom within limits. All democracies have always been that way. A lot of people do not realize that you have freedoms, but Some people say you have unlimited freedom of speech. That is not true. It has never been that way. Some people say you have unlimited freedom of expression. That is not true either. It has never been that way. And especially and it has to do with mores and ethics and civics that they don't teach in schools anymore. But there's a moral, an ethical, and a civical duty for civilians. Civilians need to know the civics. Civics is what civilians can and cannot do via the law, as well as the social interactions. This is why in my country we used to have social studies, you know. And then there's the ethical side of it, ethics. And then there's the moral side of it, what most of us agree on as the values we should abide by to have peaceful existence as much as possible with each other so that everyone is not hurt and benefits. And we've had a clash in these recent years of political correctness versus political incorrectness. Donald Trump definitely challenging that order of political correctness. And again, there's a balance between political correctness and political incorrectness. There's a balance. And we have to learn that in everything, there's balance. There's a balance. That's why you hear people say the far right and the far left, right? There's a balance. You can't be, there's a difference between extremists and moderates, right? America tries to strike that balance. Not to say that you have to be a centrist or you have to be a moderate, and that in certain things you shouldn't be more extreme with them. Like doing good, you should be extreme at doing good. You see what I'm saying? Helping and assisting people, feeding America right now, seeing people's well-being and health improving, making sure everybody has health for all. The basic rights that human beings should have, making sure everybody has those basic human rights. There's nothing about being so extreme about that, unless you take it and you're being very finicky about one particular area. But there's nothing, being extremist in that regard that makes no sense, right? So those are the kinds of things that, and let me tell you something. If you want to win people over, start inspiring them. Start letting them see all the good things you're doing, whether it's donations to charities or helping them, benefiting, building communities. Those are the thrusts, those are the places where the biggest impact happens. Because once people realize that they're benefiting from the things that you're doing, that is where the country starts to grow and really starts to do things in the right direction. That's why, trying to cancel out, restrict, suppress people, control people because the individual was never wired to be controlled. They were wired to be guided. People want to know, what does it take for me to go from point A to point Z? Not, you're telling me, this is what you need to do. Nobody likes that. No one. And that's the difference between federalism and the individuals or the individual states or individual sovereignties doing their thing. All right, peoples, I'm out of here. What you need? I've been on this political line for a minute, but I know it's expedient. We're still in the danger zone. Things are still very sensitive. But it would help a lot if Donald Trump could be removed from office before Joe Biden becomes president of the United States, before the inauguration. That would help quite a lot because he adds that extra twist to everything that makes it very dangerous. And he's still trying to push partisan lines. He's constantly been, if you look, it's always violence against people. Rappensberger, there were death threats on him and stuff because Donald Trump, Donald Trump spoke, negatively towards him. Always trying to ostracize and attack and ostracize. And that's the work of an autocrat. So he's been sort of having violent language and violent rhetoric his calling of names to people, his disassociations with people, his attacks on people. You saw they were. I mean, he just pointed to Vice President Mike Pence, and they were ready to hang this guy. Okay, so he's very dangerous, very very dangerous. And there are other people trying to come up and use the template and the blueprint that he has been doing. But I think a lot of them are going to have short political careers, very, very short political careers. There's nothing with having strong speak and strong views and trying to be a strong leader, but you have to be somebody who also has the ability to respect. You know, it must be a mixture. You know, okay. Republicans have always loved tough presidents. Presidents willing to take a stand on things. They always love that. Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush. Not so much senior. Senior was George Bush Senior was more of a, he wasn't very charismatic, but George Bush Jr. to the point, get it done. Barack Obama, same thing. You know, pointed leaders, people who are like, okay, we got this in safe hands. Good, got it. But Donald Trump brought something else to the table: vindictiveness, attacks on individuals, not just attacks on philosophies or attacks on institutions. He's attacked institutions, he's attacked individuals. It's been a very combative president and a very vindictive president. And these sort of precedents, other Republican leaders, and maybe potentially Democratic leaders too, will try to do. And it culminated into this particular incident. And this is a no, this is a line you don't cross. And that's why you saw so many more Republicans signing on to impeach Donald Trump. And regardless of how the other Republicans want to do due process or whatever, because Congress and also the Senate have their own way of conducting their affairs, and the very careful wording, not to say insightful speech, but instead inciting, has put this thing in a new paradigm, politically speaking, and will bring its own definition to the fore. And so it's very important for people to understand that that is what happened. And this is why this course of action, which if Mitch McConnell and the Republicans do choose to convict, because it's really on them, it always comes back to the Republicans. They're going to be the key players. Probably almost all the Democrats will be on board for this. It'll be up to the Republicans to convict. And this procedure could happen within a day, depending on how the mind of the Republican Party is. We could see only potential dissenters like Ted Cruz possibly and Josh Hawley, probably those two guys, being the only dissenters at the end of the day. It may be, again, a bipartisan effort, maybe even stronger than the House. And if the Senate can convict in a stronger message than the House, this is a no. That's what they would have effectively, that's what they effectively done. And it will be a very strong stance for the action of the president. And there should be some sort of note on the record that the action was so inflammatory towards the American people, and they must be very specific about the inflammatory nature, that it was so open and inflammatory, because people can use this as a trumped up charge later on as a precedent to literally politically assassinate anyone that they don't like because they have a majority. So you have to be very specific about the case and the terms of the case in the Senate, and the fact that the evidence had been seen, and the optics of it to the American people. But as the evidence comes out more and more, that's coordinated, attack, I think the correlation will be almost unavoidable. And it's already showing that this was a coordinated attack and a coordinated job. So it's a matter of time, but this is a time dependent thing because if they can get him impeached before Joe Biden is inaugurated, that's one less person we have to deal with. And a very powerful piece, by the way, that if there is any insurrection, if there is any attempt at attacking these key places, that piece that could cause a lot of problems is not there. And the fact that Donald Trump is not going to be attending the inauguration tells me everything I need to know. He's not going to be there because he knows it's going to be a dangerous environment there. So this is something that needs to be impeached. And the sooner they impeach him, the better. The sooner they can remove him from office, the better. All these moments where he's still in office, it doesn't do much for national security, doesn't do much. But once he's removed from office, we don't have to worry about his influence, his sway. We don't have to worry about him moving chess pieces, power pieces on the board. We don't have to worry about all that. So I wanted to talk about that. And once he is gone from the presidential chair, that is one less thing to worry about. There's the COVID, there's the economic situation in the country, all of these things, the morality of the FBI and all the institutes of intelligence, the media, all of these things can get kind of rectified, somewhat cited back. Of course, terrorism and all those things, the military, everybody will be able to kind of sort of align back to a certain degree of normalcy. I'm assuming they're going to maintain a certain degree of security until they get everything online. Because remember, there was a cyber attack on, the entire infrastructure of America as well while this was all going on. And then, of course, there's the threats from the outside, so they can threaten on the inside. You got to also keep vigilance for threats outside of America. So there's all of these little factors and things that have to be positioned correctly for tomorrow, for the coming days. It's not a simple situation, and that's why the fact that certain congressional representatives, actually congressmen, actually and congresswomen, actually came out there and voted to impeach Donald Trump, particularly the Republican congressman, was huge because it shows that they understand, after weighing all the evidence and weighing all the facts, that this election was fair, it was clean. And that's one thing that McCarthy did. He set the record straight that the elections were fair and that Joe Biden is the next president of the United States of America. And that's very important. Okay? And for the long-standing members of the House who had been there since Reagan, I didn't realize they were there since that long ago. Reagan and Jimmy Carter and stuff, and they've been through a number of different presidents and different, administrations. To hear them speak from that vast volume of knowledge and information, these are 80-year-old, 70-year-old people, the seniors of the House and of the Senate. I must say, it was quite a thing to hear them speak. And I do believe that the viciousness of the Senate and the House, the passion and vigorousness of debate is one thing, but the viciousness and the vitriol, that's the word I was looking for, is not something that should happen. On this issue, I think on any other issue, any other issue, we could have debate and whatever, and I would never weigh in on those things. But on an issue like this, one like this, it must be taken with the absolute, incontroversial, unhesitant show of resolution, conviction, and must be directly and immediately addressed as it has been done. Nancy Pelosi did not hesitate, and she did exactly what was demanded at this time, with resolution and with steadfast purpose to defend the United States of America. And I'm not a big Nancy Pelosi fan. I'm not a Democrat fan. I'm not a Republican fan. But that was exactly what needed to be done. That was crossing the line. The optics do not look good at all. And that's all. Whether Donald Trump intentionally or did, well, obviously he intentionally did it, but let's say he didn't intentionally do it. It was still reckless endangerment and reckless language which needs to be roped in. And the fact that he had the audacity to say, because this does not happen like this in elections in ever. It's never. But that he has the audacity to say that what he said was appropriate. That is treasonous. I don't care about the legality. That was not appropriate language for the situation. It was not. Given that the crowd understood what he meant. Oh, sorry, my bad. Let me rephrase that. It was appropriate language for the situation. That is true. Because they understood what he meant, and he understood what they meant. And they all knew what they were going to do. But while it might have been appropriate, you have no regrets that lives were lost. You don't have any feelings your wife has to come out and speak about how sad that is that lives were lost. You have no feeling of sadness, remorse that people have died because you said something that they interpreted a certain way. None. None. And afterwards you go on to say how they're so special and you love them. You love people who violated the Capitol grounds. How could you love people who broke the law like that unless it was something that you wanted done? And it showed how morally deprived he is by his conversation with Rasberger, where he's telling Rasberger, find me some votes, and he's threatening him. So a morally deprived president with no character whatsoever, who's hell-bent on having power, which he still is hell-bent on having power. Just because you can't hear him on Twitter doesn't mean he's not hell-bent on having power. And he's trying to still facilitate this coup that's in progress. This man must be moved. So that he does not use his powers to subvert democracy. So Nancy Pelosi took the correct measures and the correct steps politically to excise this guy and remove him from politics, period. The other people who were trying to take up his mantle, certain congressmen and certain senators, for their advantage, in a vitriol-like vicious cycle. These people too must be removed from office if found implicated in conspiring to incite an insurrection. But it must be proven that they conspired to do that, whereas Donald Trump directly spoke to it. But we are getting evidence that some of these people did conspire. So, with freedom within limits, hold on a second. With freedom within limits, individuals and peoples are free to do many things, except harm other individuals or things that will harm other individuals. That's freedom within limits. And that's what the laws are for. What you need in the building. Hope you guys are having a good day. I'm going to catch you guys later. Peace.